Hello again, Steve here, and today I want to talk about the Holy Trinity and Freemasonry, and a few other things that they all may sound rather strange. And the question is, why do they even belong together? Well, I mean, my brain goes in strange directions sometimes. I was out for a run this morning, and these things started to come across me. It was sparked actually. The thought trend was sparked by the idea of anarchy, because anarchy, the concept of anarchy, has been vilified lately in the public square, and I think that there's a good reason for it. I mean, anarchy in its pure form is the most dangerous concept for ruling classes, so it should be vilified. Not that it should be vilified because it's not a great idea. It is a great idea, I think, but it's got to be vilified because anything that promotes freedom, it has to be vilified by the public square, which is designed to be, to be authoritarian. And what it's described as, though, is what it's not. I mean, these hooligans who, like Black Lives Matter and Antifa and these sort of people who go about smashing down, lighting fires to cars and whatnot, as a result of free speech, these are not anarchists, right? Because what anarchy means no ruler. And within those groups, those thug groups, of course, there's always going to be a ruler. There's going to be rulers and followers. And that's not anarchy by its very nature. Anarchy is that there's no one ruler. Everybody is autonomous and everybody gets along. Or there is with his leadership. But ruler means that there is somebody who, by their dictate, by their edict, their words become law. They have the color of law anyway. Whereas if somebody was these people who talk about these free cities, who people would go into and they would sign a contract to live in the city, and in signing the contract they agree to the terms and the regulations and so on within there. Well, that's no longer a ruler in the typical sense, because those people have agreed to live under the rule of law. They have explicitly agreed to live under the rule of law, which the rule of law is not a ruler. It's rules that they've agreed to. That's the difference. That's the subtlety that I see as different. But anyways, coming around to this. So this thought anyway that came to me led me to this term archy. Like, what is this archy? Because we see anarchy, that means without ruler, because archy in its origin means ruler. And we see this show up in many different words. Like we look at oligarchy, archy there, right? We see monarchy, right? We see anarchy. We even see democracy. The cr is part of that vestige of that word, archy, rather, the ark. And we see ark, right? The ark of the covenant, right? What is this ark? It's a very interesting term. When I was in Freemasonry a number of years ago, they focus and they use allegory. What do they call it? A peculiar form of morality veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols. That's one of their unique selling proposition. And they talk a lot about the entrance to the temple of King Solomon, which had two pillars and it had an archway, which joins the two pillars. And there's a lot to be said in there. There's three components, and we also see that the power of three shows up in the Trinity as well. We also, this little tripod that I've got, it's got 3 legs. That's the minimum number of legs that it could have to be stable. I mean, anything more actually is rather less stable in a way, because it's hard to get them all to touch the surface at the time. Whereas the 3 legs, even if the surface is uneven, all 3 will make contact. It's a very stable situation. But the 3 persons in one, that used to confuse me too as a kid. I talked to my dad about it, and I would always get this fluffed over thing because it's religious to him. He was fundamentalist guy. Whereas to me, I like to see things in terms of their allegory, in terms of their metaphor. And it's interesting how one of those 3 is man. It's really interesting too, because in my thinking and also in my writing, you would in fine bookstores coming soon is my latest book, my walk and everything, but it's largely a lot about my thoughts. I talk about this, I talk about the Trinity, I talk about the pillars of Jacob and Boaz at the entrance to King Solomon's temple and so on. Talk a lot about those different things, and about how this can tell us something, right? It can tell us what's going on and how we might want to govern our lives and see how societies can be better. What I see it as, coming through the metaphors, is that the one pillar is man, right? In order for us to do whatever we want, we got to be ourselves. When I say man, I mean man in the rather androgynous sense of mankind. We don't have to attach a sex to it. It's man. I mean, hey, woman, by the way, there's man in there. So we are man. I don't like this idea of human. No, human is an adjective. Get rid of it. It's not a noun. So mankind. And I see this. So that's the one pillar. We have to be part of the equation to make our societies and to make our lives great and so on. So what's the other pillar? Well, the other pillar has to be the things we create, right? Because we need houses, we need roads, we need systems of organization and leadership and everything. So we create all of that. That's our strength. Just ourselves, we're not much. We're as vulnerable as many animals. In many cases, very much more vulnerable than them. So we have these two pillars, but we have to connect them. And the connection is the arch. And that's what we create things, but they don't govern our lives, but our association with them does. And that is very powerful. So, but the question is, what do we have that's governing us? And whatever's governing us has to be held up by us and what we create, always. Whether it is tyrannical or whether it is voluntary, it doesn't matter, right? The most tyrannical king requires the pillar of the people he calls his subjects, and he requires the work of their labor and their soldiering and so on. Without those two, no matter how powerful he might think he is, he falls apart, right? We see this in the in the Trinity as well. We see one of the pillars is man, and Jesus, he says that he's the Son of Man, which I've talked about that extensively in several other books as well. He says that he's man, so he's one pillar. Then there's the Holy Spirit, right? The Holy Spirit is the spirit of man. I mean, it's what comes from us as man in general, right? The holy means the complete. It's all of us and what we create in our societies. Like a society, if you look at society, that's in a way, it's an expression of the spirit of man. I mean, you might say, Steve-O, you're just drawing, you're just making shit up. Well, sure. But I try to interpret things that make sense to me, that help me, right? Because we can't just be rational. We're also very tribal, we're very story related and so on. So if we can make sense of these stories in terms of what they mean to us, then we can make sense of the world and we go, aha, I get it. I see what's going on, right? So anyways, if we have these two pillars, man, the Holy Spirit, on top of that is the Godhead, the governor of all that. But they're all one because they're connected and they rely on each other, right? You drop one, that one falls down. If that one falls, that one falls. You don't have the top, you don't have them joined. So man can create all kinds of stuff, and if it was to drift off into outer spaces and have use of it, he's back with one pillar again. So they have to be all interconnected. And so the question is, what do we want as our archy, if you will? Well, I have come up with it, with what I've termed before, and a lot of people say anarchy, but anarchy has got this terrible label attached to it, this sense it's almost overused, it's got too much baggage attached to it now. So, you've heard it first, Malarkey, the rule of law. So the rule of law is what is the most advanced form of society, I would say, and this is not, and it has to be agreed upon, otherwise it's not law, it's dictatorial. Law is what we agree to as law, or it's actual law. I mean, gravity's law, doesn't matter whether you agree to it or not, but in order for us to have truly judicial law, where there's justice, we have to have an agreed, right? Because consent of the governed, right? So I call it Larkey, lawarchy, the rule of law, right? And not Malarkey. It might be my Larkey, but it's not Malarkey. But yeah, Larkey, that is an approach to take. And I see people are playing around with this with voluntary cities and so on, which I predicted a lot. I talked about the free enterprise city quite a while ago, and it's interesting to see other people talking about it now. But I don't think most people are ready for that yet. But hey, it's interesting to hear the conversation. It's interesting to see that people are going to try this sort of thing, and it'll be interesting to see what comes from it. But the key being rule of law, that we have man, we have what man creates and what man puts as the connection between them. The better we choose, the better archy we choose, the more freedom we're going to have. And the more freedom we're going to have, the more prosperity we're going to have, and the more prosperity, the better our quality of life. My choice is the rule of law, which means voluntarily consented law. And I'm going to call it Larkey, but not Malarkey. Steve here again, great chatting. Talk again soon. Bye for now.